So I had this thought yesterday as I was preparing for this review that mid-range is kind of a weird concept, I think, for a lot of people. I think treble is well understood. People know that treble is high frequencies, it's cymbals, it's crashes, right? It's like sometimes it makes ouchy feelings in your ear, but treble is the high stuff. And then bass, people understand bass because everyone loves bass. Bass is, it gives you that wub, it's got that physicality. A lot of people can't get enough of bass, but mid-range, I guess it's just everything in between, but is there such thing as too much mid-range? Well, let's talk about that. Hey folks, I'm Mark Ryan. This is Super Review, and today we're talking about this. This is the Letshuoer DX1. It is a new dynamic driver IEM coming in at a price of $160 US. I had to check my notes there to make sure. And yeah, this is an IEM that is confusing for me in a couple of ways, including that it seems like a lot of people like this IEM, which is interesting. It's also confusing because I can't find it for sale anywhere. And also just like, who is this IEM for? Like on their website, they literally in one sentence call it for gamers, musicians, audiophiles, and singers. So maybe this is for everybody, but for the past couple of weeks, I've had this thing on hand, been listening to it, comparing it with some other IEMs, and I'm ready to let you know what I think, which is, I guess, the point of this review. So before we get to that, a quick shout out to Letshuoer for sending in the DX1 for review. If you want to check it out, I will have Letshuoer's website linked in the description. They do have it listed on their website. There is a buy button that has been sold out for as long as I've checked, but I also haven't found it anywhere else. So if I find it anywhere else, I'll link it in the description down below. But otherwise, let's talk about this IEM. We'll start with the physical form factor, packaging, boxing, what you get inside the box. It's kind of a cool little box. Like, look at this guy. It's cute, it's handsome, which frankly is also true of the IEM itself, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. We'll save the cute, handsome talk until after we talk about what you get inside the box, which is this little carry case, which is quite nice. I think this is the same carry case that actually came on their much more expensive Mystic 8 IEM. It's got a metal aluminum bottom. You can see that it's got a silicone ring on the bottom, which is nice because when you put it on something hard, you don't get this ringing metallic sound. It's just kind of nice and it stays place. I like that. And then it's got an interesting lid, which is also silicone. You can see that like kind of peels up and then it seals on top of it. And in fact, it seals real good. You might notice that it's bulging out because it is literally an airtight seal, which is interesting. But it's a nice case to carry your IEMs in, I guess is where I was going with that. Nicely made, a little bit big for me, but I dig it. Apart from that, you get a set of ear tips and then you get the IEM. So we'll talk about the IEM, the build quality in a little bit, but a quick note on the ear tips, which is actually kind of a cool spread to see. So I keep saying this, that I think IEM should come with more ear tips because when you have more ear tips at your disposal, you're just more likely to get a good fit that's not just like comfortable, but also a stable fit that also gives you the sound quality that is optimal for your ear. So seeing 3 different sets of ear tips in here that have 3 different distinct shapes is actually quite nice. So this is the standard Letshuoer ear tip. This is the large size. It comes in small, medium, and large. In fact, all of these come in small, medium, and large. I'm just showing you one of each, but this is their standard ear tip, which is generally a pretty nice ear tip. You know, it's got a little bit of a wide bore. It's got kind of a stiff silicone core here, but I would call this just kind of like a pretty typical run-of-the-mill ear tip, but a well-made version of it. But also included in here is this ear tip, which is, it might not be totally obvious, but this is also a large, but you can see that it is quite a bit shorter than the one on the left. And that might not look like a lot shorter. When it comes to fitting inside your ear, that 2 millimeters right there makes a very, very big difference. So this will change the way it fits in your ear. The silicone on this is a lot softer, both here on the umbrella as well as on the core. And as you can kind of see, even though the length on this only appears to be about a couple millimeters difference, if you actually judge it based on where the base of the ear tip is, or sorry, the nozzle, it's even more. It's probably like 3 to 4 millimeters shorter. So quite a bit shorter of an ear tip. I think this is the ear tip that listeners have been calling like the coffee tip. It's kind of a standard design I've seen on a lot of IEMs, or just a lot of ear tips in general. It's a little bit wide bore, as you can see, even wider than the stock Letshuoer, and a decent ear tip, although I found that this one, the the outer silicone is a little bit too soft for the IEM. The IEM itself is a little bit on the heavy side, and because of that, well, I like to have a little bit of a stiffer silicone structure. But then they also include these, which a lot of people call these the onion ear tips, as you can probably imagine because of the shape. I think this is the Triclarion is the brand name on it. And I generally don't love these ear tips, but a lot of people do. They work for a lot of people, so it's kind of cool to see them. Again, especially because they're just a distinctly different shape than the other ear tips, and having that access to a different shape is going to matter a lot. These are a little bit on the long side, which is probably why I don't find myself reaching for them very often. But again, it's nice to have the option. But let's talk about the IEM itself, starting with the build quality, physical form factor, then we're going to get into talking about fit and comfort. And I'll start actually just here talking about this cable, which is an interesting choice. I think Letshuoer generally does some of the best cables in the business, like no joke. They really do some really nice cables. This one I would say is an interesting choice, but not my favorite. So what I like about it is how thin it is. And I don't know if it's going to come across exactly how thin this cable is, but this is thin. This is like a 2-core twist that is still thinner than most like single core cables, okay? This is a very, very thin cable. And I like that. I like a thin cable that doesn't feel, like it doesn't feel insubstantial, like it's got a nice bit of weight to it. My biggest issue with it is it's just a little bit stiff and a little memory prone. Like it's almost got like the effect of like a memory wire. You can see how that's still kind of retaining its boxy shape that I just bent it into. Now, the good news is that it'll work itself out pretty easily if I do one of these little stretches, or especially if I heat it up. But nonetheless, no matter how I treat this cable, it just always feels a little bit on the stiff side, a little memory prone, and just ends up not being my favorite, despite the fact that I should like a thin cable. Part of it might also just be that these earpieces are a little on the heavy side, and I tend to prefer a thinner cable on a lighter IEM and a heavier cable on a heavier IEM. So there is that. Now, in terms of hardware, here is your 4.4mm connector. I don't believe this is a swappable termination, it's just 4.4. I imagine you can also get this in 3.5 if you want, but it's kind of a nice build on there, nice and compact, which I dig. You've got a pretty standard Y split. You've got a chin slider, which, ooh, unfortunately will not stay in place very well. You know, it's not the slightest of chin sliders, but you're gonna have to reposition it every time you put this thing on your head, which is something that kind of annoys me, but it might not annoy you. You make up your own mind. And then down here, of course, we've got our preformed ear hooks, which are a little bit on the long side. I don't know if that's gonna come across necessarily, and maybe it's just because I haven't given it the hair dryer treatment to reshape it, but I find that these make the roadie wrap a little bit messy. Here, let me roadie wrap it for you, just to kind of show you what I'm talking about. And part of it's also probably because this cable is so thin that it roadie wraps so compact, right? Which is nice, but then you get like these straight wires on here that I don't like the aesthetics of that. But again, I could fix that if I wasn't being lazy with a hairdryer. And if you're not sure how to do that, I actually have a video about how to do that. I guess maybe I'll link that up here. How does that work? I'll link it right there. But otherwise, you have a pretty standard 2-pin connector, although it does have this right angle on it, which, you know, gives it a little bit of extra curvature around the ear. But yeah, you can see it's just a normal 2-pin connector. If you wanted to swap this out with another 2-pin, should be no problem. Or if you wanted to put this cable on another IEM, should be no problem. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't have like a recessed connector, although you might see that the plastic here is actually pretty compact. So that should actually fit into a recessed connector. Now, while we're zoomed in here and I'm talking about these connectors, I want to complain about something that you might have already kind of caught on to. But there's no obvious left and right indicators on it. Like you can see here on this one, under magnification, I can see that that is an L. This is literally the first time I've seen that, is looking at my screen here. It is so small, so impossible to see. Oh, look, there's the R. Oh my gosh, it is actually there. I can't see it normally, and maybe it's because my vision is not great, especially my close vision, but generally it's just pretty much impossible to see, which is why I have adorned this side with just splotches of red Sharpie marker. Once I found out which side was which, I marked it so that I would not have difficulty finding it in the future. But yeah, if you are feeling around for this yourself and you're having trouble feeling or seeing it as well, just note that the indicators are on the outside of the connector, right? So the left is on the outside. So if you're feeling around up here, like your nail will catch here, whereas on the inside it won't. And that means this is the left side, right? And then this one will catch there, which means it's the right side, but it won't catch there. That's how you tell. I do the hard work so you don't have to. You're welcome. Anyways, yeah, it's about as much as I can talk about this cable. So let's talk about the earpieces as I Rode wrap this thing together. And I think this is a pretty nice looking earphone. In fact, I really like the way that this thing looks. It's a single dynamic driver set. So, it's got some single dynamic driver vibes to the build quality. It kind of reminds me of, there's a couple of file IEMs that have a very similar form factor to them. The FD3, FD5, FD7. And probably even more. I don't know. They keep coming out with new ones. But yeah, very similar build quality, form factor. It's a little on the compact side, which I like. It's quite small. And I'll throw on my ear in a little bit to show you what comfort looks like, but want to continue twirling this around to see the aesthetics. It's got a little bit of dimensionality behind it. This almost gives me almost looks like something you want to take a wrench to and tighten it, but I haven't tried. I don't think it's made to do that, but you get this dimensionality from this grill behind it. I don't know. I think it's a pretty nice looking little IEM. And like I've already alluded to a little bit before, it's got some weight to it, right? This is a very solid piece of metal. I'm going to guess these things are made out of a stainless steel. I haven't looked it up, or I don't even know if they say, but I'm going to guess that these are made out of a stainless steel. So they've got a nice weight to them and they feel premium and nice. But let me throw them on my ears real quick as I untangle this very thin cable. And we'll talk about fit and comfort. There you go. Like I mentioned, it is on the small side. So it is not taking up very much room inside my ear, as you can see. If you're used to seeing this close up of my ear, you're probably used to seeing an IEM fill up the entirety of my conchable. Whereas, look at that, you can actually, you could fit something behind that thing in my ear. There's so much room. So yeah, I don't think anyone's going to have issues with this thing feeling too big in your ear. The downsides of this kind of fit, however, is just fit stability is not fantastic. It is typical dynamic driver fit stability, which means that pretty much all of the stability is coming from the ear tip and how well it couples with your ear, right? So again, it's good that they include multiple ear tips so you get to try out some different fits, but it's never really going to fit as stable as something like a semi-custom, like you'll see in more typical hybrid designs. But I don't know, it was not really an issue for me. I'm just saying, if you're mobile, if you're sleeping in an IEM, something like this, going to be more likely to come loose over time, because it's not gripping onto the conchable. It really is just all down to that ear canal purchase. Now, give you the side profile so you can see how far it sticks out here. If I were using a smaller ear tip, it probably could fit in a little bit deeper. Actually, absolutely could, but I find that the nozzles on these things are a little bit on the long side, and actually, because of I need that ear tip grip to get that stability. This, I think, is actually pretty representative of how you should expect it to fit on your ear as well. Let me give it a quick measure on the nozzle for the nozzle peepers out there. So yeah, 6.3, 6.2 millimeters. It's not a super small nozzle, actually. I'll say this. It didn't stand out to me necessarily that it was a 6+ millimeter nozzle as I was wearing it, but here I measured it and we just saw together that it is. So maybe a little bit on the wide side, but again, given the way it fits, it's not like a really deep fitting IEM. It's going to rely kind of more on just fitting into just the ear canal entrance and giving you kind of this ball and socket type feel to get that good fit stability. But okay, that's enough talk about how this thing fits in my ear. We got to talk about how the Letshuoer DX1 sounds. Pulling up my notes real quick, but we are, of course, going to look at the frequency response graph of the DX1, which I've got up on Squiglink. If you want to check it out for yourself, I've got it linked in the description. You can pull up a bunch of different IEMs and compare it, and hopefully you understand how to read frequency response graphs. But if you don't, let's talk about it together. So I've kind of alluded to this earlier. Okay, I didn't kind of alluded to this. I very much talked about this in the introduction. This is very much a mid-range focus sound signature. You can see that it's got a little bit of a bass lift down here, but just to note, this bass lift is all sub 60 hertz, which is to say most people aren't going to hear this as a bassy IEM. It's got, a nice extension on the bass. It's got, enough bass. I don't think anyone's going to mind it necessarily, but it's not a boomy, boxy, muddy bass at all. Definitely not a V-shaped sound signature. In fact, this is kind of just like enough bass to make it so that people don't complain about it not having bass. Is basically where the bass levels are with this thing. And then the top end, the treble, well, treble graphs can be a little bit tricky to read, partly because they're tricky to read, but also because the measurement of the treble can be a little bit fraught. But I don't know, there's some things in here that kind of stand out to me as like this giant delta between, what do you call it, 8K and 12K or something like that. That to me, when I see something like that, you'll see similar patterns in some other IEMs, but this feels a little bit more precipitous than typical, which is to say this is not a very bright trebly IEM, which leaves us with the mid-range. Hence, it's a mid-range IEM. But notably, it's actually kind of relaxed here in like the upper mid-range, right? This is where my heuristic for understanding this is that this is, you know, where you get like vocal emphasis. So when you have too much upper mid-range lift, some people will complain about it being shouty, which I think is a made-up term, but people complain about that. You're not going to have that issue here with the DX1, even though it is a mid-range focused sound signature. I don't think anyone's going to call this thing a shouty sound signature, but you just kind of end up with this kind of low contrast sound that doesn't have a lot of bass, doesn't have a lot of treble, and it just kind of ends up being dominated by the mid-range, which, if you know my tastes and how I'm often saying how much of a mid-range stan I am and how much I love the Sennheiser HD600 because of how much I love mid-range and how I don't care about bass because I love mid-range, well, you might think this is right up my alley. Well, let's talk about my own listening impressions, which is generally, I'll be honest, I don't care for this thing very much, which maybe should be surprising to myself, but it's not really. Like, as a mids guy, I think that this thing sounds immediately wrong in my tonal benchmarks. If I'm not listening to my tonal benchmark music, it can sound kind of normal. Like, again, it kind of sounds low contrasty, a little bit stuffy maybe in like the vocals, rather than having kind of like that forward clarity and like nuance and texture in the vocals. It really is just kind of like this stuffiness, a little bit nasally. Nasal is not quite the right term. I guess honky would be the technical term. But it doesn't have a whole lot of texture in the mid-range. The vocals in particular just sound a little bit soft and bloomy. The treble, I think, on this thing is, again, it's relaxed, and I don't think anyone's going to have issues with this thing being too trebly, but I found that hi-hats sound a little bit hushed and kind of plasticky sounding. Like, I don't get that metallic ping and that ringing that I want to hear on a cymbal, right? On a thing that's metal, I want to hear it ring. And here with the DX1, it really does come across like a little bit on the hushed, kind of quieted, muffled side. And again, it kind of lacks texture and detail. The bass performance on this thing, I think, is kind of similar. Like, it's just, it's there. There's not really a whole lot of tactility behind the bass. There's not a lot of spaciousness in the sound generally because it's not really incisive. Doesn't give you a lot of sharp definition on the attack on instruments and stuff like that. Kind of sounds low res, if I'm perfectly honest. And I don't know. I'm a little befuddled by the sound signature here on the DX1. They make some deal about this being like I think they're describing this as a driver that they manufactured entirely in-house, which is maybe interesting. The frequency response I've not seen anything really like this, and I'm kind of curious what they were going for. Again, back to their language, it's for audiophiles, singers, musicians, and gamers, which feels like they're trying to say this is for everybody, but my opinion is I don't think everybody's going to like the DX1. It's not really for me. If you want to really know what mid-range sounds like, well, the DX1 will let you know that. And I guess, I don't know, that's, oh, you know what? Before we get to the conclusion, I will give you another alternative, which is this, the Moondrop Kadenz. So this one came out, I don't know, about 6-8 months ago at this point. Also, I would describe as a mid-range focused sound signature. Also a single dynamic driver. Price is a little bit higher, but both of these are under $200. And the Kadenz, I think, is just like, this is what I would want. What I do want out of a mid-range tuned IEM. You know, this is very much a vocal focused set, but the bass has got fantastic physicality behind it that is just completely lacking in the DX1. You compare them head to head, it's really not close. And then you get to that texturing and that nuance in the mid-range and the vocals and the instruments and stuff. I feel like the Kadenz does a fantastic job of all of that. Maybe the upper treble, I think I talked about this in the review. It wasn't as obvious when I was doing the comparison here, but I still think that effect is there a little bit. That upper treble is a little bit muted on the Kadenz, and because of that, the ringing of cymbals and hi-hats isn't quite as metallic and natural and realistic sounding as my favorite sets, but I would say it sounds a whole lot better to me than the DX1. It sounds a whole lot more natural and normal sounding, whereas the DX1 is just, frankly, a little bit on the weird side. And now we can go ahead and do my scoring and review. Anything else I want to say about checking my notes just to make sure? No, I don't think so. Out of 5 stars, the DX1, unfortunately, I'm going to leave it with just 2 stars. I don't really get the point of this IEM. It's a single dynamic driver set, mid-range focused sound. You want to hear what mid-range sounds like? Well, maybe you'll like it. It's not offensive sounding. Okay, it doesn't have that going for it. But oh, and it's beautiful. I do like the way it looks, but yeah, other than that, sound-wise, it's pretty unengaging. And even as a self-professed stan for mid-range, the DX1 is not it for me. But if you want to check it out, of course, I will have it linked in the description down below somewhere. Again, wherever it is available for purchase. If it is available for purchase, will be linked in the description down below. And while you're down there, if you haven't already, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell, join me on Discord, also linked in the description, and I'll catch you on the next super review.
Join with the force of reviews. We now have the tools to brave the misleading world of audio fools. Hey, this review is super, and so are you. Grab your headphones, sniff a graph, and share your thoughts in this pursuit. Let's get into the future.